Hey everyone, my name is John Scott. I'm the co-founders of ScopeStack, leading services CPQ built for our industry. So it's been pretty cool to continue to roll this out over the past 4 years. Our goal at ScopeStack is to help MSPs and VARs increase accuracy, consistency, and profitability by optimizing that pre-sales process, specifically around services. In addition to the ScopeStack platform, we thought it would be a great idea to start something called the Expert Series of these virtual events and webinars. We've, in the past 4 years since we've been doing this, I've been very fortunate to talk to a lot of really just smart people. Todd Kane is one of those people. So he is, it's great to talk to someone and they understand the problem that we're trying to solve. And I'll turn my video on. Hey, there I am. So like we often find ourselves in this, we want to automate whatever we're doing. Well, Todd and I often talked about, if you don't have a very good process, it's hard to automate that, right? And so we often find ourselves having that sort of conversation. So we thought, why not kick off this expert series with Todd Kane from Evolve Management. So Todd spent over a decade developing a management framework to help managed service providers increase their margins, reduce employee turnover. Again, his company is called Evolve Management. He provides guidance and resources to enable MSPs to reach their full potential. So Todd, thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, let me see if I can get your make co-host. There we go.
There I am.
There you are. We look beautiful. So as you can tell, we look similar, so it just makes even more sense to continue this conversation. But Todd, thanks for hopping on our first ever Expert Series webinar. Glad to have you.
Yeah, no, it's great to be here. This is a topic I'm really passionate about. So I can jam on this for a long time. So, and I think there's lots of low-hanging fruit as well. So I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, and again, I'm not that smart, right? So like, I don't think this is a complicated problem, but it seems like a lot of people just struggle with it in a sense. Where do I even start, right? And so I wanted to get your kind of input on that. What you're telling people out there in the industry. If I'm looking to solve this problem, where do I start?
Yep. At the beginning.
At the beginning, yes. That's always a great option.
Yeah. So I've got a quick deck that we can zip through, and then I think leave it open for some questions, either things that people are struggling with and want some direction, or maybe qualifying some of the content here, and we can banter back and forth with some war stories. I'm sure there's plenty of this.
Let's do it.
All right. So I'll kick this off here. All right. You guys have my screen share? Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, you look good.
Okay, perfect. So I think the best way to kind of view this is project maturity, right? So that's sort of the way I'm going to approach this. There's a lot to cover here. And so we're not going to get to all parts, but really just wanted to start with some of the basic mechanics. This is a bit of riffing off of some blog posts that I've done as well, and just around project maturity, measuring your project maturity and trying to make some incremental changes to increase your project maturity as well. So not all encompassing, as you can probably imagine. It's a fairly complex topic, but we'll at least sort of hit into some of the high level pieces and try to provide some immediate value, or at least some places to start looking, right? Because as you said, where do we start? So as John said, I'm Todd with Evolve Management, and I help managed service providers and IT service companies be more profitable and with less stress by systematizing and building on industry best practices, and just sort of figuring out where you want to be and where you are, and figuring out the plan to get from where you are to where you want to be efficiently, effectively, and with everybody on board.
Man, you can tell me how to be less stressed. I'm all for it, Todd.
Yeah, a lot of that comes with systemization and delegation, right? So
Yeah.
management is something I focus a lot on, but it all starts with service, right? Service has to be in place first, or your customers are not going to listen to you about much else you have to say. But very near behind service is projects. And I think one of the things that I see as a bit of an issue in the industry a lot is that, especially in the MSP side, the managed service side of the channel, where projects are not really viewed as a primary mode of business, or certainly as a revenue center or a profit center for that matter. In a lot of cases, people are billing for the projects, but what I see is, easily 50% of the organizations that I come across don't have a great measure of profitability of those projects.
Yeah.
And that's a great example of just moving up a bit on that maturity, right? So that leads us to, it is a bit of a spectrum, right? That people sit on from that people can see of the where they sit, right? So some people are very, very mature and run projects really well. They have project management. It's very formal. Some of the things that you should consider using, if you're not, obviously, is a bill of materials or just some type of simplified view of what we're doing. SOWs are super important, right? Like you guys have built a product to help accelerate companies in developing their SOWs and being detailed and making that process repeatable, which is incredibly important because that's how we sort of scope this work and make these proposals that eventually become projects. And this sort of is a good pause on one of the areas that people get wrong, I find, is in a lot of sort of low maturity organizations, as they start to use SOWs, they tend to use SOWs as a sales document, and it is not. Right? Like that's where a bill of materials or something simpler, like just a proposal, could be a hell of a lot simpler to get put together. So really all the client is looking for in that first part of the engagement is, how much is this going to cost me and what do I get from it? Right. Yeah. So sure, a SOW can give you that, but are you going to dedicate, a tech's time 2.5 hours to write a statement of work from scratch? If you're using ScopeStack, then hopefully it's a lot easier, but it's still kind of overkill. Right. So I think really understanding what's necessary in order to win the business first, and sort of understanding what sort of the minimum viable product that you need to be able to produce something that will enable that sales vehicle is a really good place to start. Right.
Yeah. We use it so we typically use like the whole work breakdown structure thing, right? So it's kind of your point. It's like the bill of materials and services world. So these are the steps, right? And you can decide to share however much you want, but that's also what we use to like drive, the alignment between pre-sales and post-sales later on, which is, it's hard for post-sales and PMO to look at this full-fledged statement of work and like, how do I extrapolate a work plan out of that, So what we want to do is give them exactly what you're talking about. Like, here's like the high level plus some more detail potentially, but it's not all the language. It's like the steps, right, that are going into completing this project.
Exactly. Yeah. And all you're looking for is some level of detail and organization around steps to be done, or certainly deliverables, and then effort, right? Like that's all that you need typically in a sales portion. So that's a really good place to start, is a simplified document. I usually suggest a proposal, right there, where it just lists the deliverables and the cost and maybe some other minor items, and you can basically build out a presentable document from a work breakdown structure or a bill of materials to create that. So that's a great first step. Scoping efficiency, I kind of talked about that. Like how do you get this scoped? In a lot of cases, if you're building, John, like your product, we originally connected on this as one of the things that I use is sort of this Excel calculator, and you guys have built basically a really mature version of the same thing, like an app that does a better job of doing what the Excel spreadsheet does, but it's still like starting with something like that, and hopefully you're using ScopeStack. If you're not, then definitely check out the product, but it helps with this efficiency around scoping and the repeatability, because I think a big lie that we tell ourselves in this industry is that everything that we do is somehow unique. And that's the furthest thing from the truth, right? Like some organizations may do specialized projects on occasion, but it is actually kind of rare. like most of the things that we do are fairly routine and repeatable, at least from a modular fashion, right? Like 80% of what you do is probably going to be common across multiple clients. You're doing a 365 migration or setting up a backup service or migrating some workloads to the cloud. Like most of that work is fairly routine, and you can kind of itemize that and put it into something that allows you to quote it in a pretty efficient manner, because you know what the work looks like and you generally know how long it's going to take. So that's sort
Yeah.
of that first step of that scoping efficiency. Yeah.
We don't have enough time for my rant on that whole thing, but I mean it's 100%. But one question I wanted to ask you, like around project maturity and that, like, can you, like, you've been out there talking to a lot of VARs and MSPs. Can you predict the health of an organization based on the percent of their business that's services versus just product? I mean, can you kind of get a feel for a good organization versus a one that could get better?
Yeah, it is. It's a bit tricky because it depends on what the predominant business model is, right? So if you're primarily a managed service provider, then generally your managed recurring revenue should be 75% of your top line revenue, or at least at the very least, sort of your services revenue. And I typically suggest 25% ish for non-recurring revenue, because a lot of organizations, especially people that are going into the MSP space, they get very excited about the fact that like all of their revenue is managed recurring revenue. And that's not necessarily a good thing, because you do need people to spend money on projects. They need to keep their technology current. They need to replace aging architecture. They need
Yeah.
to progress things forward. So there is an absolutely necessary element of that non-recurring revenue, usually done in projects, right? Um,
Yeah.
if you're a VAR, for example, and your predominant model is more on NRR, then I think what you want to start to look towards is how are you sort of building or scaling that side of the business to create some recurring revenue. And this is more of a progression of the industry, but I think people have seen sort of how well the MSP approach works. And
Yeah.
if you're a pure VAR, then you sort of know the history of the roller coaster sales cycle of just constantly looking for the next project, and you end up with a lot of these peaks and valleys on your revenue
Yeah.
and profitability. So maybe you want to look towards getting 25% MRR as sort of a low baseline, and then start to work up from there. But kind of depends. But generally, you'll sort of see some indications of that around how they approach the different services, right? And
Yeah.
the quality of the projects and the maturity of the projects is usually a pretty direct reflection of how they view that as a central point of their business. If it's really, really
Right.
important, or as people have literally told me in the past, is projects are a means to an end in order to make sure that we keep them on contract, right? Not the right way to approach it,
Yeah.
because the best way to think about this is that the MRR, it covers your operating costs from day one. It's the beauty of the model, is that you can bill it straight on the first of the month and cover the majority, if not all of your costs, and maybe some margin on top. But if you're not getting the projects right, you're deeply missing the profitability options that are available to you. Because if you're doing this well with fixed fee projects, tight scopes, delivered well, high customer satisfaction, then reasonably you can get 65% margin on your projects, right? And that's
Yeah.
sort of
I mean,
that other piece of the missing pie here, is that people often don't know how much they make on projects, either as a whole from the business unit, or
yeah.
even on individual projects to measure the profitability on delivery, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's what we see a decent amount is step one is like, let's define your resource rates. Like, how much do you charge for a resource? And unfortunately, some people can't even tell us that, right? So, like, it's just,
So
there you go.
good.
Hey,
Excellent
there you
segue.
go.
Resourcing.
Yes.
So that's a good one. Like a lot of projects are built with just sort of a default billing rate of say $150, and your internal costs don't necessarily match that, which that's problematic. But again, it's dependent on sort of the resource availability that you have, and sort of the scale of maturity that you're on in this journey, right? One of the things
Right.
that I see people struggle, sort of more elementary issues around resourcing is that it's a shared resource, right? So you have a person who is
Yeah.
most of the day doing tickets, and then on the side of their desk, they're trying to complete some projects. So the sort of that fractional approach becomes really difficult for them to time manage and prioritize because, you know, when a client is waiting for something and or something has exploded, then that obviously takes priority, and therefore you end up with projects that constantly slide. And you see this with end dates are set. We hope to complete this project by the end of next week. A
Yeah.
month later, it's still sort of open and incomplete because people can't sort of break out their time and create the space to be able to focus on the activities necessary in order to complete those projects, right?
Yeah, it's like the standard chicken and egg thing. Like I know I need to solve this, but I can't because I'm doing this, and it's just like this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Um, so see it all the time.
Yeah. So over time, you may be able to dedicate people towards the towards just doing projects, right? But for that to be effective or practical, you have to be able to build a project funnel that feeds that beast and make sure that you can actually keep that person busy. So until then, you do need to create sort of this fractional approach where you're borrowing time from the service group, and usually kind of the tier threes and the architects are the ones that you're going to be gearing towards the projects. But it is sort of a necessary evil in the early days when you just don't have enough of the resources to be able to spread around. So if this is not an issue and it's really just resourcing, and you do have dedicated staff that work on projects, 50 or 60% or even 100% of their day, fantastic, right? But otherwise, you need to think about how you approach this intentionally. And one of the things that I suggest here, if you are sharing resources, is think of their time in blocks of 2 to 4 hours. So if you're scheduling them for project efforts, then you want to say, Tuesday at 10 a.m., this person is working on this project until noon, and like they can't be disturbed unless something is blowing up and on fire, right? So that you're actually protecting their time and helping them to be able to prioritize and focus on the effort towards those projects. And I find that that's a really helpful sort of first step, is just starting to compartmentalize some of that time and isolating people so that they can focus on this. So I usually think of this in kind of 2 to 4 hour blocks, whatever's practical. And that's a great way just to make sure that some progress is made and that the projects don't sort of fall to the wayside because of the demands of service, right?
Are you seeing that same thing or in terms of like shared resources, even on the selling side? So pre-sales and post. So the engineers doing the work are also the ones helping scope and price. And are you seeing a lot of that combined shared resourcing, or are you seeing more separation of the two?
No, it's generally shared, and again, this depends on sort of the primary mode of operation of the
Sure.
organization and
Yeah.
and sort of the size of the team, right? So you'll see this push from sort of traditional VAR salespeople is I need a dedicated pre-sales person or pre-sales tech, and it's like, not really. I mean, like, we won 4 projects this month. Does that mean I need to dedicate 40 hours a week for someone to do pre-sales? Probably not, right? If you're in a mid-size or an enterprise organization that does a lot of very large, very complex projects, then maybe you do need a dedicated pre-sales tech. But I find in
Yeah.
most cases it's not necessary. It's just a function of being able to manage their time appropriately and, quite honestly, setting expectations. So if the salesperson requests something from the technical team, either a quote or a SOW or some type of technical design, expectations around how long they have to turn around that work product is really helpful to sort of setting their mind at ease that they will get something back in a timely manner.
Yeah. And I gotta admit, I can't stop looking at the donut in the picture of your slide right there. So
Yep.
maybe I'm just hungry, but
It's everyone's
so
trying to share their resources there, right?
that's what it is. Okay. That's what it is. I don't
All
do
right.
that. I want a donut.
Yeah. So next one is a really important one is project kickoffs. This one tends to go fairly well. I find people like, so just to give a bit of a window on what we're going to talk about here in sort of the next few slides is there's 3 components that are really important for effective project delivery: is a kickoff, comms on execution, and then close for the project. So kickoff sometimes gets done, and this is a great sort of starting place in the measure of maturity for how you're managing projects, is if you're not doing a structured kickoff of the project where you potentially involve the client. It depends on the sort of scope of the project. If it's a one-day effort, then maybe you're not sort of organizing a call to review the SAO with a client. But if it's like a multi-week project and there's sort of 6 people that are eventually going to be involved in this thing, then yes, you need to be more formal, involve the client. And this can be really helpful for making the deliverables and the scope clear, so that like the client understands these are the deliverables. This is how we measure whether or not this project is completed and completed effectively. And these are the people that are involved. This is how long we expect it to take. And everyone kind of reviewing that and determining sort of where things are going to land and how it looks is a really, really important factor for getting off on the right foot and making sure that you get some level of buy-in from the people participating in the projects and also the client sponsor for that project. You had a comment there?
Just 1,000% agree. That's all. Yeah.
So next one, this is where it starts to get a little iffy as to whether or not these things are happening. So the kickoff sometimes happens, and in most cases, like at least there's some type of internal communication of, hey, we're doing this project, you're involved, this is what's expected. And then there's sort of that scale of or spectrum of maturity around that process. The comms rhythm is where things really fall off, and just updating the client or making sure that you're involving them and keeping them informed about what's happening. And there's a lot of good and bad that happen with this. One of the things that I would tell you to absolutely avoid is don't bring the client onto a phone call with the project tech and ask the project tech how things are going. Right. You never want this to be a kind of a live Q&A with the person, like as if you're getting this information for the first time. Right. So this is where project management becomes kind of important around this, like without the hours dedicated towards this stuff as a billable entity, right? Like project time, management time absolutely should be billable. This is one of the primary reasons why building a fixed fee project is helpful, is because then the client doesn't have sort of the awareness to push back on you, but because it is 100% necessary. But definitely making sure that you're keeping the client informed and you're enhancing that value perception, right? Like you look organized, you guys seem on top of what's happening, and they're going to trust you a lot more as a result of that. It demonstrates a lot of process maturity if you're able to sort of act on these things. And it doesn't have to be long. Like this can be a 5 or 10-minute meeting. It could be an email on a weekly basis, as long as it's done in a regular and recurrent fashion, so that the client feels informed and has an understanding of what the progress of that project looks like, and also helps the PM to kind of keep status on the tech's delivery and keep them accountable to their deliverables as well. So definitely focus on what that comms rhythm is. If it's a weekly meeting or an email, regardless, it needs to happen, right?
Yeah, and I also consider that relational capital to a certain extent. Like you're continuing to build that capital up, and there's a point in time when that relational capital will become very important, right? And so if you're
100%.
doing the things that you're talking about, building that trust and that value that they're receiving from you, it just continues to build that capital.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great one. All right, so finally, the project close. This is the one that even in mature organizations tends to get left for dead, unfortunately. It's usually just kind of running and gunning. All right, like that project is complete and I've already started a different project, so I don't really have time to focus on that one anymore. So okay, we're done and then we'll move on, right? Is sort of how people typically approach this. But you need to formalize the close of the project, right? So if they're a more significant project, people that are doing so fixed fee projects, billing for the entire project up front before you start it is what I advise. Before people are able to get there, they're still quite often billing, say, 50% on start and 50% on close. And if you don't run a good project close that sort of establishes that the project is complete and the deliverables are complete, then I often see organizations kind of holding that project hostage and not wanting to pay for it because either you can't get them to agree that it is closed, or there's some disagreement on the scope or whatever the case is. You want to make sure that there's a formal close that is supported by the kickoff, right? So this is a closed loop. Like, we determined these are the measures of success and the objectives of this project. We now can demonstrate that these objectives are delivered. So therefore the project is closed. So it allows you to sort of collect that extra 50% if you're billing in two parts on that project. But if you can bill fixed fee up front, all the better, because then now you already have your money. The other piece that's really important for this is document the project. This might have been a suggestion from you, I think, John, recently when we were talking, but you talked to someone who did the documentation before the project even started, which I thought was a really great idea, because then it formalizes the delivery of that and ensures that that's happening, because that's a place where people fall down a lot. Is the project is done, but the changes are made and no one really knows about it is a bit of an issue that we see a lot as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a unique use case of ScopeStack at the time, but we had a customer said, "Hey, I see you can automate statements of work, but can we actually automate the deliverables document so that my team doesn't go fill out a billion things that the client didn't pay for, right?" So like, how do you know, now that you have that work breakdown, there's some consistency from both what you're telling the client to what you're actually delivering, and then to your point, closing that loop with actuals, updating your scoping effort and all that is. Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other piece that this helps with is a Kaizen approach, right? So always looking for continuous improvement. What went well on this project, what needs improvement, and being able to feed that back into your process in the future is really, really helpful.
Yeah.
Good examples are, we keep scoping this project for this work item takes 4 hours, and every time it seems to take 8 or 9. So we need to adjust our expectations around how much work effort this is. Those are great things to be able to capture in a project close, versus just sort of like, oh, this is out of budget. I don't know what happened. Okay, well, we're busy, so let's keep moving, right?
Yeah. Well, and the opposite too, right? Which is, so you're talking about one that it always takes us more time, but what if it actually takes you less time than what you're scoping it? You could potentially be losing deals because you're not competitive, and it actually doesn't even take you that long, right, to do
Right.
that work. So, just another scenario in which you should update actuals.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
All right. So some final pitfalls. Number one, the cardinal sin of IT project management is don't let the techs manage their own project. It is a terrible practice. Like, unless this is a single sort of task or a 1-day scope of work that they're completing, sure, then they can run it on their own. But otherwise, like, it's the fox looking after the hen house. And in a lot of cases, it doesn't come from a nefarious place. Like, there's just a lot of self-justification that can happen in a person's head around why they deprioritize something, why something did or didn't happen. And there needs to be some level of check and balance. So somebody needs to PM this project. It's usually, if you're a small shop, it's maybe the owner, it's maybe the service manager. It could be a different senior tech, whoever it is. Somebody else needs to watch the projects, not the person that is primarily the person responsible for the delivery. So that's a big one. Not managing deliverables, right? So being clear about the deliverables in the scope of work when you're doing the kickoff, and as a part of that close, just being really tight with that and understanding what a good quality complete project looks like is often determined by measuring those deliverables. And then finally, cold handoffs or no handoff at all, where the project is done. We decommissioned an Exchange server and moved everyone to Office 365, but we didn't tell anybody about that. So the next person that goes to support that environment is like, what the hell is going on here? I don't even understand where anything is. Right. So a great piece of work that you can do as a part of that project close is a warm handoff to service, where they maybe are participating in their stand up and saying, this is what we changed. This is the things that we did in this environment. These are some of the gotchas you maybe want to expect. And here are the people you should contact if there's an escalation related to this project. So it helps, again, to kind of close that loop and hand it back to service, right? So that they're current on what the environment looks like and any changes that were made, so that they can better support it. Right. and kind of basically on time. Trying to keep it tight for you guys.
Look at it, we nailed it.
Yeah. If you want to check out some other info, like I said, I have some more detailed blogs about these types of practices. You can scan this QR code or go to itisabusiness.com. Because it is a business, we need to run it that way. And if you like, you can sign up for my weekly email. I've got some industry insights and educational content every week that you can jump on there. I talk about everything from management practices to industry insights, projects, service delivery, managing your ticket queue, all kinds of stuff. So jump over there and check that out.
Yeah, Todd. And again, it's very tangible stuff, right, that you can use, and just great thought process as Todd's been doing this and talking to all sorts of VARs and MSPs, around the world really at this point. So, Todd, we, appreciate you joining us and bringing some of your knowledge bombs to what we do over at ScopeStack. And again, so this is our first version of this expert series webinar. You can register for future versions of this at scopestack.io/expert. And again, if you haven't tried the ScopeStack platform, we'd love to have a conversation with you. So you can go to our website, scopestack.io, and request a trial or request a demo, and we'd be glad to go forward with that. Well, again, thank you for everyone for joining. Todd, thank you very much, sir, for joining us, and we'll see you out there.
Appreciate it. Thanks,
All
John.
right, thanks, everyone. Bye.